Alright, we are back with a new video, and today I want to talk about one of my favorite shows, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. This is not a ranking video, just a discussion. You might be wondering why I even bother with the show. I mean, it ended 2.5 years ago, the fandom is a shadow of its former self, and G5 is already up and running, so who cares? Well, I care, because I think Friendship is Magic is one of the deepest, most intelligent cartoons ever made. Rather than making me forget, a new generation presents a unique opportunity to explore its predecessor's thematic undertones. Then again, when they're both set in the same universe, that's kind of by design. Even so, many people were surprised to see how bleak the future is in Equestria. After all, Friendship is Magic ends with the bad guys being vanquished, Twilight Sparkle becoming ruler, the main six plus Spike and Starlight living happy, fulfilling lives, and Equestria seemingly becoming this multicultural utopia guided by the principles of friendship and magic. It's a storybook ending, literally. And to see a future where all that comes crumbling down, invalidating an entire decade of these character struggles, triumphs, and growth is both deeply upsetting and a bit confusing. Naturally, all types of theories cropped up trying to explain what went wrong. Everything from random villains to broken artifacts to gradual collective amnesia started to gain traction. And while I can see why such ideas are attractive to the fanbase, I don't think they truly get to the heart of the matter. Because whether people fail to realize or simply don't want to admit it, the seeds to Equestria's eventual failure were baked right into the fabric of G4. If you ask someone what the central theme of Friendship is Magic is, chances are they'll say, well, friendship is magic. And I agree, friendship is magic. But if you ask them why friendship is magic, well, you'll probably get something along the lines of, it makes you happy, or gives life meaning. But ultimately, these people are wrong. Friendship isn't magic because it makes you happy, and it certainly doesn't give life meaning. No. According to the show, friendship is magic because it's a tool for building allies, acquiring power, and instilling that power's legitimacy among your subjects. And that idea is best encapsulated in the show's protagonist, Twilight Sparkle, or as I like to call her, Twily. You know, I always find it cute when fans of the show say that Twily is the hero. I mean, that's technically true, in the same way that everyone is the hero of their own story. But here's the truth. Twily is a selfish, manipulative, and power hungry brat, and the fact that more people aren't calling her out for her crap is kind of astonishing. Then again, this speaks to how effectively the show spins her every action into a positive, as well as her ability to manipulate everyone around her, including the audience. On the surface, Friendship is Magic seems to be a simple story of Twily learning the value of friendship, saving the world a bunch of times, and eventually being rewarded for it by getting to be its ruler. In reality, Friendship is Magic is the story of Twily's methodical and ruthless rise to power, despite being unfit to rule, with a new generation highlighting the natural consequences of a society allowing such a development. Now, before you dismiss this as some shitpost, I assure you that I got evidence right from the show. Let me explain. There are countless instances in the show where Twily is blatantly evil. Her very first scene has her stomp on Moondancer's confidence by rejecting her party invitation, derailing her entire life for the next couple of years. If that isn't enough to make you hate her immediately, I'm not sure I can help you. But let's continue. We also learn very quickly that she mistreats her assistant, Spike. Literally, her first interaction with him is her whacking him with the door as she barges in. And instead of asking if she's okay, she just barks orders at him when they are on a break. She's then sent to Ponyville despite having a complete disdain for other ponies. We know from pretty early on that Twily has a very high opinion of herself, that she's too good for ponies beneath her, which to her is most of them, and thinks that her intelligence alone will give her influence. Much of the pilot has her rejecting the main six efforts to befriend her and trying to solve the Nightmare Moon issue on her own. She finds their antics annoying, weird, and unproductive. But by the end, she comes to learn the value in having friends. Friends allow her access to the elements of harmony, one of the most powerful weapons in the world. That alone makes her nearly unstoppable. But she also learns that getting others to do her bidding has its perks. It makes life easier, sure, but it also opens an avenue for greater ambitions. If people like you, if they are loyal, they can be convinced to do stuff for you, fawn over you, serve you, enrich you, go to battle for you, die for you. If enough people are on your side, that turns you from nearly unstoppable to completely unstoppable. It's through this calculation that Twilight agrees to stay in Ponyville so that she can do her work free from the close supervision of Equestria's actual ruler. Now, she acts like it's because she's genuinely grown to care for them, but we see pretty quickly that she doesn't actually care for them. We see at the beginning of Gilda the Brush Off when she cares more about the book she's reading than what Pinkie has to say, and when Pinkie runs off to find Rainbow Dash, she sighs in relief. And there are plenty other instances of this as well. It's pretty clear that Twilight is simply using them for personal gain, as it's quite clear that despite having great ambition, she doesn't actually have that great of a work ethic. Of 24 episodes in which Twilight reported her quote-unquote findings to Celestia, at least 9 of them involve her reporting lessons she didn't actually learn. In Gilda the Brush Off, she claims she learned that it's hard to accept when some pony you like wants to spend time with some pony who's not so nice. Aside from the fact that Gilda isn't some pony, Pinkie did the heavy lifting in learning this lesson, while Twilight swooped in and took all the credit. Call the Cutie and Showstoppers have her reporting stuff that the CMC learned. In the latter, she even begs them to do her report for her. Oswald the Enswell literally has Spike doing the report despite Twilight clearly having a hoof in that episode's conflict. So clearly, studying friendship for its own sake was not a priority for her in season 1. The lessons and reports were purely performative. And what episode shows this better than Lesson 0, where everyone manages to get along well enough for her to not have anything to report, prompting her to create a conflict just to make herself look good to her superior. And after she gets caught, she has Celestia force the others to do reports as well. Of course, as we just established, Twilight actually wasn't working hard, but now she ensured that her friends would pick up the slack. In fact, I did the math. Of 18 letters to Celestia written during seasons 2 and 3, do you know how many of those were actually written by Twilight? 1. And that was in Luna Eclipsed, literally the episode right after Lesson 0, meaning she probably did it to save face. By comparison, Spike wrote 2, Rarity, Rainbow, and Fluttershy each wrote 3, Applejack wrote 4, and Pinkie wrote 5. Despite being Celestia's student, Twilight did the least amount of work, and it's clear that she was doing this to take all the credit, and yet she reaps all the reward despite doing the least amount of work. It's quite fitting the ponies she surrounds herself with. Each of them are useful to her in different ways. There's Applejack, a dutiful, honor-bound worker. There's Rainbow Dash, a muscle that's labeled as the embodiment of loyalty to keep her in line. There's Rarity, whose clout offers Twilight a hoof in the door when Celestia's ruling class. There's Fluttershy, whose connection to nature keeps non-pony creatures subservient. And then there's Pinkie. Well, Pinkie is a bit of a thorn in Twilight's side. You see, it's no secret that Twilight is deeply annoyed by her antics specifically, but it's also apparent that Twilight feels threatened by the pony who's friends with everyone. After all, this is the same pony that got a sick kick mowing down dozens of Pinkie clones and probably wouldn't have cared if she accidentally killed the real one in the onslaught. There's also Trivial Pursuit, where of all the potential partners for the contest, Pinkie is the only one that fills Twilight with dread. To her, getting stuck with Pinkie is a fate worse than death, and her treatment of her so-called friend is hard to watch. And who can forget the moment from the movie where Pinkie dared to call her out on her bullcrap, prompting Twilight to nearly assault her while saying maybe she'd be better off without friends like her. While the movie tries to pretend that Twilight was addressing all the main 6 with that outburst, it's pretty evident she was directing all of it, all that anger, at Pinkie, and she was letting out her true feelings towards the mayor as well. Those tears Twilight shed after the fact, those weren't due to the guilt of hurting her so-called friend's feelings. They were due to the possible dread of losing all her power, her allies, all the work that she's built up for over these last couple of years. Watching that scene in the theater was the moment I realized that Twilight had been the villain this whole time, and then everything else that we saw beforehand just fell into place. But I digress. If Pinkie were to serve any purpose, it's to basically be someone to mock, someone to tease. Obviously, she needed that before with Spike, but with Pinkie being someone who is the biggest threat to her actually being a representative for friendship, Twilight decided that she needed to beat Pinkie down so that she never has any ideas or recognizes that Twilight is somehow inferior to her. So that is Pinkie's purpose within the service. So no matter where you look at it, each of the main 6 fulfill a specific utility. Each on their own is an ally that serves Twilight's purpose. But Individually, each of them spurs a very specific purpose that collectively allows Twilight to maximize her strengths while minimizing her potential weaknesses. Things don't get much better as the series goes on. Despite not doing much good for anyone, she's able to put up an act for Celestia gaining her trust and tricking her into thinking she'd make a great leader. We all know that Celestia makes Twilight a princess at the end of season 3. Remind me again, what did she do to earn that? Well, she cast a spell without knowing what it would do, mess with the elements of harmony, humiliate all of her friends, shatter their self-confidence, and nearly destroy their livelihoods, just so she can swoop in, be the one that rescues them, and ensure that they will be even more loyal to her moving forward. And at the same time, she impresses Celestia by solving a massive crisis which she single-handedly engineered. No one except Spike ever learns the cause of the crisis, by the way, allowing Twilight to always be seen as a hero, and people never seem to remember that she was the one that caused the problem in the first place. But it all fits into her power play. She once again breaks down the main six and then rebuilds them in her own image so that they will see her as the hero, the one that is grateful. Imagine lesson 6, except this time her plan actually worked and her reward was even greater than another grade on her report card. Truly shameless. This brings us to season 4. She has her wings, she wears this crown, she's a princess, this is true. But it should be clear to us that enough is never enough. Sure, Twilight has the title now, she can fly, Celestia sees her as an equal, and everyone in Ponyville is grateful for seemingly saving them over and over. But like every Disney princess, she wants more. She relishes in the limelight, feeling slighted by all the Manhattanites that don't give a flying feather about her, thinking that her dumb Star Swirl convention is more important than helping out her friend after falling ill, relishing in all the attention the CMC and the Phillies give her, including the free food. But don't let the Princess of Friendship title fool you. She's just as selfish as ever. Despite Pinkie being very upset about everyone forgetting about her when Cheese Sandwich comes to town, Twilight can't be bothered to do more than the bare minimum when acknowledging her. When she doesn't want to befriend Maud for being a quote-unquote weirdo, Twilight can't even be level with Pinkie about it, opting instead to pass the buck and make someone else be the bad guy for stating their true thoughts. And don't even get me started on her trying to force Rainbow to study for her Wonderbolt exam her way, not even realizing that her way doesn't work. And yet, despite failing to live up to her title multiple times, she still has the gall to whine to the other princesses about why no one respects her or gives her more responsibility. Which brings us to Twilight's Kingdom, where she once again pulls off what she does best. Sit back the whole season while friends do 99% of the work, going through the hardship and emotional turmoil to get the keys, have the princesses inexplicably hand over all their magic, making her a literal goddess, avoid her friends under the guise of protection, despite hanging around in Ponyville and placing it in direct danger of T-Rex attack, do the last 1% of work needed to save the day, and then reap all the benefits, credit, honor, whatever. Oh, and give her a castle while you're at it. Season 5 doesn't get much better either. Despite saving Equestria from the biggest threat yet and getting her own castle at the same time, enough is never enough for Queen Twilight. There's a lot of stuff I could get into, like her whining about the castle not being rustic enough, sleeping through an important summit, nearly starting a war with Yak-Yakistan thanks to her incompetent diplomacy, and insulting displays of cultural appropriation, forgetting her friends' names and not taking a hint when someone wants to be left alone, and thinking her friends' lives revolve around her and demanding to know their every waking moment. But we don't have time for that, because I want to talk a bit about Starlight. Starlight. When we meet her, she's a strong, independent mare. Sure, she had a tough childhood, but she worked past all that, making her a power wielder of magic. But more importantly, a confident leader of her town. Everyone loves her, no one feels inadequate, and they never stop smiling. Not even Celestia is that effective, but where everyone else sees a blooming hydrangea, Twilight spots a tall poppy. As an aspiring leader of Equestria, Twilight can't afford to let anyone threaten her position, and so she waltzes in there and promptly smears Starlight's reputation while brainwashing them into her own self-serving philosophy. Her goal is simple: discredit Starlight and take away everything that makes her strong. And by the end of the cutie map, she does just that. But unlike other pony characters that lay down and start sucking up to Twilight, Starlight wasn't so easily broken. Especially after spending the next few months observing Twilight's terrible example, she refused to let Twilight demolish others the way she demolished her own livelihood. Starlight was also smart enough to recognize the danger someone like Twilight posed to the world and what her ruling Equestria would entail. She needed to nip this in the bud, prompting her to create the time travel spell. And while a lot of the futures we see in QTE Mark seem pretty bad at first glance, Starlight points out that we only see what Twilight wants us to see. Of course, Twilight would only want us to see the worst, as it really reinforces the fact that Twilight is necessary for the future success of Equestria, and it serves to stroke her overblown ego. But ultimately, Twilight overpowers Starlight, not with actual magic, but through manipulation. She forces Starlight to relive her past, losing Sunburst, reminding her of why she has no friends, and gaslights her into thinking that a world without Twilight would be disastrous. Starlight gets broken down by all this and becomes convinced that she'll never find true happiness, or at least not on her own. And so, she submits to Twilight's punishment, which is to be her student. Season 6 is known as Starlight's redemption arc, but it's really about her becoming a tool in Twilight's plan. Just look at her in the first moments of the chrysaling, getting lost in the castle, and getting embarrassed after walking on and Spike brushing his teeth. Listen to her voice as she says, "Sorry, Spike, I guess I'm still trying to find my way around." How weak and ashamed she sounds. Look at her when she can't fathom the thought of reuniting with Sunburst without having some PTSD episode. Jump ahead to No Second Prances, where Twilight closely monitors her friendship with Trixie, someone that is motivated to get back at Twilight. Despite Twilight saying that she trusts Starlight to make her own decisions, she clearly demonstrates that she doesn't trust her at all. And it all works out perfectly for her when she confronts the two of them, triggering Trixie to admit the truth, and further breaks Starlight's spirit by saying that she only became her friend to get back at Twilight. Again, Twilight is in the center of a lot of this drama, and a big reason why Trixie is able to hurt Starlight's feelings this badly. And it was all Twilight's doing anyway. How about in Heartwarming Tale, where Starlight's guilted for wanting to mind her own business rather than indulge in some decadent party, and is cast as the villain in the story who brings about the apocalypse. And when Starlight dares to challenge this false equivalence, she's met with a brutal reminder of her past. A fairly common technique, by the way, for keeping her downtrodden and under control. But this beating doesn't just apply to Season 6. Season 7 has Twilight not wanting to let Starlight go, and she's more than relieved when she quote-unquote chooses to stay. And by Season 8, she's stuffed into a guidance counselor office at a school where the teachers are designed to be guidance counselors, and so she's left with nothing to do but to sit and rot. And it's a shame to see her go from this to this. Redeeming villains has always been a source of contention in the fanbase. Why are these villains getting redeemed, even after committing horrible crimes? Why are Starlight and Discord being reformed, while others like Cozy Glow and Chrysalis being left to rot? Well, at this point in the video, it should be pretty clear. Characters like Starlight and Discord are strong enough to be useful in Twilight's power play, plus their minds are malleable enough to be broken down and molded to serve her purposes. That is the true deciding factor in all this. Despite Starlight's leadership and confidence, Twilight figured out she had some inner demons and exploited them until she was broken down. With Discord, she had someone that Fluttershy could appeal to, rein in, and serve her cause. And we can go through this with all the other side villains as well. But with those other villains, the ones that are not redeemed, there was no gain to be had for Twilight. Multiple efforts were made to break Chrysalis and Tyrek, but none were successful. At the end of the day, both of them were just as power hungry as Twilight was, and no amount of ostracizing could break their spirits. And then we get to Cozy Glow. In many ways, Cozy Glow is like Starlight. She's a capable leader that can bring others together, plus she sees through Twilight's shenanigans and wants to do something about it. But despite being a literal child that doesn't almost destroy civilization with time travel, there are two critical reasons Cozy is never reformed. One is, as I just mentioned, she's got an unbreakable drive for power, whereas Starlight had a sob story that allowed Twilight to get into her head. Cozy never had such trauma. She doesn't have a backstory and therefore no weaknesses to be spoken of, and no means for Twilight to break her down. She has a commitment to stop Twilight at any cost and serve the good of Equestria, but ultimately that is her undoing at the end of the day. Which then brings us to our second reason. Whether we like to admit it or not, Cozy is also like Twilight. Both of them see friendship as a means of building allies and consolidating control. Unlike all the other villains of the series, Twilight couldn't merely talk her down because, deep down, they were essentially the same pony with the same goal, same mindset, and same capabilities. Cozy was using everything Twilight was in order to undermine her. She was beating Twilight at her own game. No compromise was going to solve that. Total annihilation was the only way to ensure she had a complete monopoly on the ideas of friendship. And thus, Cozy, along with the others, were turned to stone. By this point, no one was left that could point out the irony of the situation. And thus, after 9 seasons, Twilight had convinced Celestia to abdicate the throne and pick her as the successor. Of course, we know by this point that Twilight was unfit to rule. No, not because of episodes like Trivial Pursuit, where she once again puts Pinky down over something as silly as a trivia contest. No, not because of episodes like Sparkle 7, where she wastes royal resources on a silly game between her and her brother. And no, not because of episodes like The Ending of the End, where she throws a massive pity party after finding out about the Grogar situation, but more because she's the same selfish, manipulative, and miserable pony we've seen since season 1 exploit the idea of friendship to carefully consolidate her power and squash any opposition. Even in the last problem, where we see the moments leading up to her coronation, she can't go 5 seconds without making it all about herself. Even when the main 6, who at this point have become complete sycophants beaten down by the system, are working hard to make a grand, perfect ceremony that's all about her, Twilight once again guilts them because they're not focusing on her every 5 seconds. The scene where she lashes out at them, only for the main 6 to immediately assure her that they are very sad she's moving away, is deeply unsettling. The way in which they suck up to her, saying they are sad she's moving away, and collapse into tears reminded me of Kim Jong-il's funeral, where the peasants were forced to mourn as loudly as possible to avoid being sent to a labor camp. Truly sickening stuff. It's kind of fitting that the coronation itself is a disaster, not just because it reflects Twilight's short-sightedness and her need for constant attention, but it also foreshadows Equestria's fate under their new leader. For centuries, they had a strong, steady hoof at the helm of Celestia, and in just a few short years, a smug brat talked her into throwing it all away. And while we get glimpses into Equestria under Twilight's rule, giving the appearance that everything is as great as ever, it conceals the problems that would eventually cause it to crumble. In the real world, authoritarian regimes utilize propaganda to instill loyalty among their subjects, but also to create an image of freedom and prosperity to outsiders like us, even if the reality is anything but. You've probably seen this in the form of state-sponsored news outlets, posters, and films, but some regimes take this to another level. North Korea has a village outside the DMZ that appears peaceful, wealthy, and a decent place to live. No one actually lives there, and it's mainly used for photo ops when diplomats visit and to attract defectors from the south. But just because you can create a nice display and shine some bright lights doesn't make the problem go away. And that leads us to a new generation. Equestria has been run into the ground. Racism is rampant, while cynicism and fear are at an all-time high. This was no accident. When your leader is only focused on their overblown ego and sees friendship merely as a means rather than an end, you're left with an incompetent government that's focused more on serving the whims of its pompous dictator than serving the needs of its people, and through that breeds mass suffering and division. Rather than being a radical reimagining of Equestria, a new generation is a logical continuation of Friendship is Magic. I think the craziest part of all this is that despite being a terrible leader that caused all this to happen, we see in the movie people look up to Twilight. They see her as this great leader and an emblem of what Equestria used to be and what it probably should be moving forward. And if that's the case, then we should probably look at all this with some caution. After all, I just spent the last 20 minutes talking about why Twilight was the problem and how she was the one that got us into this mess, even though we don't seem to realize that looking at the surface. And I think that's a testament to Twilight as a character, her ability to completely manipulate not only the people around her, but future generations into thinking she was a good leader. And I think through that, that reveals a very deep meaning in terms of what friendship is and what it can be utilized for. Twilight, in many ways, is the villain of Friendship is Magic, of G4. And if we are to be believed based on G5, then of the next generation as well. In any case, we should be reminded about what came before so that we can avoid repeating the past. And there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. I enjoy talking about MLP and other shows I cover on this channel, like Total Drama, Owl House, and other series I plan to cover moving forward. Again, I really appreciate all of your support, and I'm glad I could have discussions like this. And I do plan to talk more about G5 as it comes out, as well as talking more about G4 moving forward. I really appreciate it. But for now, that is the video. See ya.